Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Miller Talk and JBU Show. Hello, everyone. I heard myself. Welcome to the Miller Talk and JBU Show.
What are we doing today, Austin?
I don't know. For some reason, I'm hearing myself.
What are you doing today?
Yeah, an echo. Is that coming from? For some reason, I'm hearing myself.
Is that
Is it coming from you?
Are you?
Yeah, and JBU Show.
I don't think it's coming from me. I can hear you.
I heard myself. Is it coming from you?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
And JBU Show.
I don't think it's coming from me. I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you now.
That's weird.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
That's weird. It's still going. Can you hear me? It's still going. Can you hear me? Well, this is fun. Now I can't hear him. Well, this is fun. Now I can't hear him. Well, this is fun. Can you hear me?
There we go. Sorry, man. That was my fault.
It was your fault?
Yeah, I clicked on your stream to share it while you were talking, and I didn't realize that it opened your stream, so your stream was playing on my computer.
Oh. Also, I just found out that the Rumble page, you know, it plays your stream. It wasn't muted. So that was a fun start to the show.
So let's try this again. Wait. Okay, now. Okay, or not,
I'm not
whatever.
ready. Can you hear me? No?
Are you muted again, for real?
Can you hear me?
Can't tell if he's playing. There you go.
Okay. I was playing with all my settings, dude, trying to figure out what was going on. That's the fun of using a whole bunch of different things. But so are we?
Yeah, I mean, it's
I'm still live. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the shit show. This is
today we're discussing how to do podcasts in 2026.
How to do a live stream podcast in 2026. I'm just gonna delete this Studio One recording and start that over. So
when I opened my live stream program today, everything was fucked up, and that's part of what took us so long, because I had to resize everything because it just decided to make it all way bigger. But I did that before we went live, like a professional. But that's just me.
I didn't. Okay. Everything was set up on my end to start. I did not foresee this problem coming about. So
I made him wait too long is what it was. Well, I'll tell you while he's trying to get that straightened out. I'll tell you we're going to be talking part 3 on the American Gospel by Jon Meacham. We're going to be going through chapter 2 today. Introduction, chapter 1, chapter 2. That is why the numbers don't line up, because we weren't smart enough to start with part 0.
Yeah, it was an accident.
But yeah, so we're gonna have a discussion about that and go from there. Yeah, let me get my notes up. So
we did the first chapter last time. It was chapter 2 is the longest chapter in this book. So chapter 2 will become 2 parts. So part 4 of this series will be over chapter 2 still, but we're only doing half of it because it is fairly long and hadn't made it through and everything. So yeah, but chapter 1, I mean, there was a lot to talk about, but I thought it was a little boring. But chapter 2 has me very intrigued, and that's also why I've already decided to do 2 parts, because I'm sure even we may have to do 4 parts, depending. It's pretty good stuff in here. So
I don't know if we'll have to space it out that bad. But
yeah.
chapter 1 was mostly about the history of America before it became America, while we were still British colonies. And it was kind of about the way in which the British Crown utilized religion to keep a firm rule over the colonists in certain areas. This was not necessarily true in all of the colonies everywhere, but it was especially true of certain figures in certain places. And there was practical reasons for this, like the threat from Native Americans, and there were more tyrannical reasons for it, which was keeping people in line because they were starting to develop a bit of a disloyalty to the crown.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was kind of laying that backstory of this is the world in which the founders were brought up in. This is what they experienced, leading to them developing the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And I assume that's where we're going, but
yeah, I mean, yeah, that's basically spot on. He's basically giving us, you know, the history of what is leading up to the revolution and a little bit of like just what overall was going on in America from the time it was basically founded to first colonized up to the revolution. And chapter 2 is "In None Shall Be Afraid, the Revolution, the Constitution, and the Creation of the Presidency." So we can see why he did that, because now we're moving on to the revolution. Also, just mentioning it to the stream, we do have Chris is in the super secret bunker today, and that's why he is in Noir.
that's me. Now, actually, I went back in time, and I'm actually bringing this to you from the 1930s. Turns out it wasn't that the TVs were black and white, it's just everything's black and white in the 1930s.
Yeah, it's crazy.
While it looks like I'm filming in black and white, it just is black and white here right now. Weird. It's a weird phenomenon, but color was invented.
Today is also Rededication Day, the 250th anniversary. I think that kind of aligns with what we're going over today.
What is that?
On March 16th, 1776, the First Continental Congress, or at the Continental Congress, whatever, declared that May 17th be Rededication Day, a day for praying, fasting, and humiliation for the country.
I might have fasted that, but I just had a big old fatty sandwich.
Yeah, there's also a little bit of why we're delayed. We usually go live at 6 p.m. on Sundays, but yeah, we kind of...
Pacific time.
6 p.m.
Well,
specific.
Between Central and Pacific, depending on what our schedule looks like.
You can say that. 6 to 6, somewhere around there. People are like, what? What do you mean 6 to 6? What does that mean?
6 p.m. somewhere, God damn it.
But yeah, so that's what today was about. There was a large gathering at the National Mall, and there's been lots of events going on. I saw marching band was playing the Star Spangled Banner and everything, so pretty good day.
Whatever that damn buzzing noise is, you got it going on again. Did you put an AC in that room or something? No,
I have my fan on, my ceiling fan.
That might be what it is. You can hear mine too, but not quite as loud.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, maybe, one thing we haven't done is talk about who Jon Meacham is.
Yeah.
I have a little briefer here.
When I bought this book, just in case you're a new viewer and you haven't caught part 1, part 2, I pretty much bought this book because of the title, and then I read, the back, And I was like, oh, that sounds like a pretty good book. And I kind of assumed that the author was going to be a Christian author. That's like, but otherwise I had no other real expectations for the book. But then after reading the introduction, I was like, this guy's definitely not Christian. Don't think he's an atheist. I think we would actually probably get along fairly well. I just don't think, have some small disagreements with him.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I don't think he's like a liberal leftist or something, but I think he's just more secular.
Whatever. It's going to drive me nuts. My microphone keeps falling down because I need to tighten the thing, but I have to use a special hex key that I don't have handy, so...
Oh, no.
Anyway. So, John Ellis Meacham, born May 20th, 1969, nice,
Dang.
is an American writer, reviewer, historian, and presidential biographer who is serving as the canon historian of the Washington National Cathedral since November 7th, 2021. Former executive editor and executive vice president at Random House, he is a contributing writer to the New York Times, Book Review, a contributing editor to Time Magazine, that's a bad mark for him, and a former editor-in-chief, not that New York Times is any better, former editor-in-chief of Newsweek. Yeah, he's a leftist for sure.
Oh, man.
He is the author of several books. He won the 2009 Pulitzer Prize for the biography or autobiography of the American Lion, Andrew Jackson in the White House. He holds the Karen and Robert M. Rogers Endowed Chair in American Presidency at Vanderbilt. There's just a little briefer on him, but it definitely seems like he's coming from a more leftist perspective, which is kind of what we've gathered so far. His history,
that.
But he does seem to be cherry picking a little bit.
Yes.
But we're only an introduction and a chapter in now. So,
yeah.
I mean, we're a chapter ahead of you guys, but we're just that good.
Yeah. So if you're new here, also, this is what the book looks like. You can get it on Amazon, and Chris has ways of getting books too. If you might message him on X or something, but
I paid for it on Amazon.
Okay.
If you were a less scrupulous individual and you were to type in the name of the book on DuckDuckGo .pdf, it might find the PDF randomly on the internet for you. Might. Or if you happen to surf Syrian and Russian websites.
American Gospel by Jon Meacham. Chapter 2. And none shall be afraid. The Revolution, the Constitution, and the creation of the presidency.
Word.
The cause in which America is now in arms is the cause of justice, of liberty, and of human nature. Reverend John Witherspoon, Princeton University, May 17th, 1776.
Good year.
That was 250 years ago today.
That was 250 years ago today. Wow, it's almost like we planned that.
It's crazy.
You want me to take a crack at this next quote?
Sure. Go for it.
Shit.
You volunteered. Go ahead.
Ye sovereigns of the European world, continue your religious oppression at your peril. So sure as you persist, thousands of your present subjects transplanted to the fertile fields, the healthful villages and populous cities of America, shall remind you of your impiety and error, when it shall be too late for you to retrieve the loss. A Friend of Society and Liberty, the Pennsylvania Gazette, July 23rd, 1788. Wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, based on the first sentence. Thought it was going to be Old English. At least it didn't have the stupid S's. Oh, God.
That'll trip you up.
I don't know why. It's so impossible to read it. Like,
my
it's
high
such a
school
minor
English
thing.
teacher told me when she got her master's degree, she had to type like an essay in Old English.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you just highlight it, change the font, or put it in AI.
Yeah, you just put it into AI and translate this to Do not change anything at all. Do not put your voice into it. Just change it to Old English.
Yeah, for anybody unaware of what exactly we're talking about here, in Old English script, S's and F's were basically the same shape. They did a special S that looked like an F, and it is an absolute nightmare to read because your brain just will not let you see it as an S or an F, or I always forget which is which. I don't remember if it's F's that are I think it's S that is different. But yeah, it's even reading it in my head is fucking impossible for whatever reason. Every night. Of course, I can't find it. I tried to find an example real quick, but I couldn't. But anyway, back to the book.
Their first fight was over faith as the founding fathers gathered for the inaugural session of the Continental Congress on Tuesday, September 6, 1774, at Carpenter's Hill in Philadelphia. An elegant Georgian brick building on Chestnut Street. Thomas Cushing, a lawyer from Boston, moved that the delegates begin with a prayer. Both John Jay of New York and John Rutledge, a rich lawyer planter from South Carolina, objected. Their reasoning, John Adams wrote his wife, Abigail, was that because we were so divided in religious sentiments, the Congress included Episcopalians, Congregationalists, Presbyterians, and others. We could not join in the same act of worship. This is how he opens up the chapter.
Yep.
So why?
And so this, if I remember correctly, this is a argument between Episcopalians and other Christian sects, right?
Mm-hmm. That's what it seems like. And so why do you think that was important for him to point out?
Well, I think for the reason he just outlined, it was the first documented controversy regarding religion. He says a little farther down, their stated reason for going directly to the business of the day that, quote, we were so divided in religious sentiments would only grow truer as the country moved beyond a diversity of Christian denominations into a pluralistic mainstream that included people of all faiths and avowedly of no faith. Well, that's mostly true. I don't know about all faiths. They did not have to confront the issue of Islam within the country. Our first issue with Islam was in 1776, but it was something that the founding fathers never really. It wasn't a problem of them coming to our shores because they had no interest in coming to our shores. They just made themselves enemies of us from day one. And so I mention that because, of course, it's an issue that we face today. It's a problem that we discuss today. And how do we deal with it? Now, I argue they've already given us the tools to deal with it, but we can talk about that if you want to, or we can talk about it another time. But it wasn't really all faiths. There was atheists, but there really wasn't many at this time, considering everybody came from, Europe. They were all pretty heavily Christian. And it was different denominations, Catholicism, Episcopalian, right, Puritans. There really wasn't a lot of other faiths that were involved at this point in time.
Yeah, that's
The reason that matters is because the underlying is that there was one God that everybody agreed on. So there was still that universal kind of truth that did bind them all together, even though they disagreed on how to practice their faiths.
Yes, that's basically what was going on. They all believed the same things. It was just more or less how they practice.
Right. He goes on to say, Samuel Adams of Boston spoke up to Mr. S. Adams. Mr. S. Adams arose and said he was no bigot and could hear a prayer from a gentleman of piety and virtue who was at the same time a friend to his country. He was a stranger in Philadelphia. By the way, John Adams wrote this to his wife. He was a stranger in Philadelphia, but had heard that Mr. Duché deserved that character, and therefore he moved that Mr. Duché, an Episcopal clergyman, might be desired to read prayers to the Congress tomorrow morning. Then, in a declarative 9-word sentence, John Adams recorded the true birth of the culture of the public religion. Quote, the motion was seconded and passed in the affirmative. Samuel Adams, a one-time tax collector, had carried the day. In the Rights of the Colonists in 1772, Sam Adams had written, as neither reason requires nor religion permits, the contrary, every man living in or out of state of civil society has a right peaceably and quietly to worship God according to his dictates of his conscience. And this was, I guess, not the introduction of this idea, but I think what he's alluding to is that this is the introduction of this idea into Congress, that there's going to have to be a much more neutral stance than any of the particular sects wanted, by the government at least, to religion. Because all the sects, right, they wanted their religion to be
yes
religion.
Yeah,
but
that's the
founder. Go ahead.
That's the main thing that was going on in that time, was people were discussing which one of them, Catholics or Quakers, Puritans, which one was going to be, the state religion or whatever. And in the end, they decided to not declare any of them as, the one that is the most right, because government has really no reason to do that. At the end of the day, it's just you're all Christians. So
yeah, and when he said the public motion was passed in the affirmative, the motion that was being passed was making public prayer foundational. We kind of skipped over where John Adams said, because we were so divided in religious sentiments, we could not join in the same act of worship. But ultimately, they settled on this idea of a non-specific form, I guess, of worship, so that everybody could be included in it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important to highlight there was still worship involved in the government.
Yeah.
All right, what do you got next?
I highlighted more of John Adams' response to Reverend Duché's sermon, I guess.
Okay.
He said, I never saw a greater effect upon an audience, he told Abigail. It seemed as if heaven had ordained the psalm to be read on that morning. Then, without warning, Duché struck out in an exemplary prayer, Adams wrote, which filled the bosom of every man present. And so what he had said was, plead my cause, O Lord, with them that strive with me. Fight against them that fight against me. Take hold of shield and buckler, and stand up for mine help. Which he doesn't actually quote. It's from Psalms, but he doesn't actually say chapter verse. It's kind of rude.
Yeah, I didn't see it listed anywhere. Not even on the notes at the bottom of the page, which was odd. But it's worth noting that he goes on to talk about how Adams was like deeply impacted by this particular psalm in this particular sermon. He mentions later that for 10 days after the fact, he was still telling his wife about it, basically, and imploring her to read it herself.
Mm-hmm.
This seemed to have a profound impact on him.
And that closes out the opening of chapter 2 and leads us to diabolical persecution, the first section of chapter 2 on page 67.
Yep, that's where I'm at. And this kind of moves us into Madison's idea and his aversion to religious persecution.
Mm-hmm. And we both have a little bit of a beef with Madison, but not my favorite by any means. Sorry.
He says, he's quoted as saying on page 68 that diabolical hell conceived principle of persecution, which vexes me the most of anything whatever. And he later says, so I leave you to pity me and pray for liberty of conscience to retrieve among us. Madison was by far the most liberal of the founders.
Mm-hmm.
At least from my impression, right? I should say from my impression. And he was very dismissive of the concerns of big government, of the concerns of federalizing the government. He felt that the protections that they were discussing and creating in the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment in particular, and the First and Second Amendment in particular, were more than sufficient, and that any concerns of the government becoming tyrannical or anything were just way overblown, and it was unnecessary to worry about these things. And he really just didn't have the foresight for how these things went bad, in the ways that they actually did go bad, for one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a very similar way, that with that kind of liberal mindset, when I say liberal mindset, I mean traditional American liberal, not leftist. He also has the most aversion, I think, to organized religion in general. Jefferson had a strong aversion to organized religion, but his aversion was not... The difference was he was much more... He was still extremely religious. He still very much believed in the importance of religion and the importance of God in individual life and in the government. His aversion to organized religion was that he felt that it was getting in the way of those things, whereas Madison's more liberal view was more that religion just got in the way of things, period, and that it was something that an individual should be an individual thing, period, and no more. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's more of the direction that Madison took with it, in my understanding.
He opens up this section with, as the delegates debated and deliberated in the Philadelphia autumn of 1774, a young man in Orange County, Virginia, devoured a friend's letters reporting the scene in and around Carpenter's Hall. James Madison, called Jimmy, this is the first time I've actually heard that he was called Jimmy,
Same.
so was only 23 years old, but was already fascinated by politics, revolution, and religion. I was about the same way at 23, so preternaturally solemn. What?
Doesn't it make you feel like such a lazy piece of shit to know that these men started a country at 20, 25 years old?
Yeah, like the average age of the founding fathers was like 32 or something. But there's a lot of them.
I think it was 20.
There was one
in the
guy that
20s.
lied and said he was 18 and he was actually 17. I can't remember who he was, but and then there was one guy that lied about his age too. I can't remember what was going on. But anyways, where was I at?
Sorry.
Jimmy. Yeah, okay. Preternaturally. Solem. Madison thought the Virginia delegation notable for its glowing patriots and men of learning in penetration. That's weird time to use that. It was anxious for the Congress to illuminate the minds of thinking people among us. So we get to find out that James Madison, I guess, went by Jimmy with an E, not an I. Jimmy. And at only 23 years old was already fascinated by politics, revolution, and religion.
Yeah, he goes on to tell a story about Madison too, how he was very sick as a child. It affected him as an adult, but he says at a critical moment, though, his affliction changed the course of his life. Born to Virginia gentry in 1751, he was held back for many health reasons. He had to spend time with a tutor, was an alumnus of Princeton, and keep in mind, this was like during middle school, maybe early high school years that these men were going to college, but formerly the College in New Jersey. The tutor thought Madison would like Princeton, and Madison did immensely. The school is enjoying a golden age under John Witherspoon, a Presbyterian clergyman who took great interest in the Scottish Enlightenment. Yeah, he really rambles on in this one. Ultimately, suffused American politics. Smith's Wealth of Nations, which was published in 1776.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
I highlighted
American
this part. I really liked the quote.
And government, with its argument that the government which governs best governs least. That is
I
a
really
good
like
quote.
that.
Witherspoon himself was an advocate of religious freedom, and he seems to have had the most impression on Madison. So he's kind of alluding that Madison's views were formed by Witherspoon.
Yeah, so he studied in Princeton for 3 years from 1769 to 1772. And Witherspoon was had a lot of influence on that college at the time. So
according
Madison
to historian,
said it offered free and equal liberty and advantage of education to any person of any religious denomination whatsoever.
Yep.
Do you think
William
they had
Lee Miller,
Muslims studying there?
No, they definitely didn't at that time. He reported a legend that young Madison actually heard one of the Baptists continuing his preaching unsquelched from the jail. The incident consumed Madison, who denounced that diabolical hell-conceived principle of persecution, which Madison said vexes me the most of anything whatever. Angry at his own failure to secure the release of the ministers, he had said he had run out of common patience with the whole matter. So I leave you to pity me and pray for liberty of conscience to revive among us. That's what he wrote to a classmate. Only 2 years later, in 1776, May of 1776, 250 years ago, Madison had a chance to do more than fulminate about religious freedom. He had a chance to help bring it to being.
Dun, dun,
Obviously.
dun. Yeah, this section's fairly long because he's talking about the Virginia Declaration of Rights,
Yeah,
which
he was
was
a delegate to
shortly being crafted in Philadelphia. And Madison had read George Mason's version of Article 16, that as religion or the duty which we owe to our divine and omnipotent Creator, and the manner of discharging it can be governed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence, and therefore that all men should enjoy the fullest toleration in the exercise of religion. Italics mine. I don't know why I read that. According to the dictates of conscience, unpunished and unrestrained by the magistrate, unless under color of religion, any man disturb the peace, the happiness, or safety of society or of individuals, and that is the mutual duty of all to practice Christian forbearance, love, and charity towards each other.
All men should enjoy the fullest toleration in the exercise of religion. It's a good quote.
Yeah, it says the idea of toleration bothered Madison. Liberty was the issue, not tolerance, for tolerance could mean the action of allowing something or granting permission.
And that right there, I'm really glad you highlighted that, because that right there is where I think that Madison is wrong. I think that tolerance is a far better word, because the American Constitution and Western values are not compatible with Islam. Period. Full stop. Islam is not compatible with Western values and particularly American principles. Tolerating Muslims, absolutely. As long as you are adhering to those American values, it doesn't bother me at all that you pray to a different God than I do. But we are tolerating it, because if you are to follow those religious tenets to the point that it violates, it becomes a different scenario, because you are now the way in which it violates those principles is that you are now undermining the rights and freedoms of other people, which is necessary under Sharia law. And so I think that the word tolerate is far more appropriate than how did he put it again? Can you read that again?
What'd you say? What am I reading?
The idea of toleration bothered Madison. Liberty was the issue, not tolerance. Liberty was the issue, not tolerance. For tolerance could mean that the action of allowing something or granting permission. I don't know. I find it a tough argument either way, but I do think that tolerance is just a better word there. You do have a right. You do have an inalienable right to practice whatever faith you wish to, whatever religion you wish to, however you wish to, but not necessarily within the confines of the United States of America.
Yep, because it says after that, after legislative toing and froing, the convention at last accepted Madison's language. And so this is what the Article 16 eventually ended up reading. That religion or the duty which we owe to our Creator and the manner of discharging it can be directed only by reason and conviction, not by force or violence. And therefore all men are equally entitled to the free exercise of religion, according to the dictates of conscience, in that it is the mutual duty of all to practice Christian forbearance, love, and charity towards each other. So you think toleration fits better than equally? Yes?
Yeah.
Because I'm tending to think so too.
Not by force or violence. Therefore, all men are equally entitled to the free exercise of religion. See, and that's the problem, the free exercise of religion. You're not entitled to the free exercise of Sharia law in this country.
Mm-hmm.
You are insofar as yourself, but only yourself. And the problem with Sharia law is it dictates that you exercise it on others. That's the problem. And so that's incompatible. And so for that reason, I think that The problem is, and this is the same problem that I always have with Madison, his inability to see how others might manipulate.
Mm-hmm.
He's seeing things through his idealistic view and not being able to see it how others might see it. And he's wanting to see it as if we all believe in one Christian God, but we don't all believe in one Christian God.
Mm-hmm. But that's like the idea of kind of how our Constitution and everything was set up, was through the idea that we all believed in the same God, but we don't. Because at the time, that's what was going on. Everyone was Christian. We weren't thinking about how the Muslims were gonna become what they are today.
Well, and I think that the founders were wholly, not wholly, but I wonder how aware they were, because we know that in 1776, Thomas Jefferson was quite taken by surprise when they went and met in Persia with the representative from the Muslim country. I can't remember which country offhand, but they were attacking American merchant ships in the year 1776, the year that we formed as a country. And so Jefferson and I think it was Adams, not Madison, went over and met with a delegate from these Muslim countries, Islamist countries, and said, "Why are you attacking our ships? We literally just formed as a country. We've never done anything to you." And he was floored when the guy told him, "It's our religion. We attack you because you're infidels, not because you've ever done anything to us, and we're going to continue to do it." And Jefferson this just completely confounded him. He could not understand this level of intolerance and ignorance in his opinion, or mine maybe. Maybe I'm interjecting that a little bit, but that is all after most of these writings, most of these conversations, most of these delegations. And I wonder if that conversation and that war that ended up happening took place a little bit later, if it might have changed the way in which they held these conversations here. I wonder if, because that was a separate world to them, it was not something that was really relevant at the time. And so I wonder if it just kind of got left to the wayside, because as far as the world that they lived in, everybody was Christian. Everybody did pray to the same God. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I need to investigate a little further into this, because I need to know, what specifically they have said about. Matter of fact, let me ask Rock here while you continue.
I mean, he basically just talks about the vote on the Virginia's Declaration was on June 12, 1776. The approval was unanimous, although it is not clear that the members of the Virginia Convention knew that they were doing it, wrote William Lee Miller, who is a historian. They had, by Madison's amendment, removed freedom of religion from the purview of what lawyers today call legislative grace, with the implicit assumption that what is thus given can be withdrawn by the power that grants it, and made it instead what the Declaration of Independence would call an inalienable right equally possessed by all that was new. Yeah, this whole idea that's going on that we live in, that I don't know where the viewers are from, but me and Chris here live in America. 1, 2, 3 American flags right there.
You rarely give it away, but
Yeah, I mean the Russian, or not the Russian, the Romanian AK up there kind of throws people off, but this whole
American
thing that we're
got
living in and taking part in pretty much every day, it's a brand new idea. No one came up with this before, and it's been 250 years almost, and we're out here running shit. We're running the entire fucking world. So I think these ideas that these few men had were pretty good ones. Kind of went off a little road there, but
So I have a few quotes here from founders on Islam. You want to go through those real quick?
yeah, let's go ahead. I'll put a tab on this.
All right, I asked Brock, what, if anything, did any of the founders say regarding Islam, particularly Madison, Adams, and Jefferson? And he gave me a few others too. So George Washington.
Can you put it up on screen?
Yeah. Give me 1 second here. Let me read the overview fast. He said the U.S. founding fathers, particularly the prominent ones you mentioned, generally addressed Islam in the context of religious liberty and pluralism, but mostly regarding issues like trade, diplomacy, or the Barbary Pirates conflict. Barbary Pirates is what I was referring to earlier. Let me get this up on screen. Brave.
There we go.
Sorry that the images are all screwed up, guys. Like I said, they all got messed up before the show, and I had to rework it. Anyway, George Washington said, quote, "If there are any good workmen, they may they be of Asia, Africa, or Europe. They may be Mahometans, Muslims, Jews, or Christian of any sect, or they may be atheists." In his 1790 letter to the Hebrew congregation of Newport, Rhode Island, he affirmed broad liberty. The U.S. government gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, welcoming people of all faiths, implicitly including Muslims as children of Abraham via Ishmael and Islamic tradition, as long as they were good citizens. Jefferson was a strong advocate for religious freedom that explicitly included Muslims. In autobiography recounting for the fight of Virginia's 1786 statute for religious freedom, which influenced the First Amendment, he noted that the legislature rejected limiting protections to Christians, intending to cover the Jew and the Gentile, the Christian and the Muslim, the Hindu and infidel of every denomination. In his 1777 draft bill for religious freedom, he said, quote, "Our civil rights have no dependence on our religious opinions. Prescribing any citizen, unless he profess or renounce this or that religious option, is depriving him injuriously." He owned an English translation of the Quran, the 1734 George Sale version, and studied it, partly due to diplomatic needs. Jefferson, with John Adams, met Tripoli's ambassador in 1786 and learned the Barbary states justified piracy and enslavement of non-Muslims based on Quranic interpretation, all non-Semitic nations as sinners to be plundered and paradise for fighters. This helped shape his later decision as president to launch the First Barbary War against Tripoli rather than continue to pay tribute, or tax basically, America's first overseas conflict. Jefferson saw government power as limited to acts injurious to others. Private religious beliefs, even 20 gods or no god, did not harm him. And that I agree with, and I'll circle back on that here in a second, but let's hear from John Adams now. John Adams co-signed the 1797 Treaty of Tripoli, ratified by the Senate, which stated, "As the government of the United States of America is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion." I've never read this before, have you?
No.
"As the government of the United States is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion, as it has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslims, no pretext arising from religious opinions shall ever produce an interpretation of the harmony." In Thoughts on Government, he listed Muhammad positively among sober inquirers after truth, Confucius, Zoroaster, Socrates, Muhammad, not to mention authorities really sacred, have agreed that happiness consists in virtue. Later, private correspondence to Jefferson in 1814 was more critical, calling Muhammad a military fanatic who used force. Like others, Adams saw Islam through lenses of both tolerance in domestic policy and realpolitik in foreign affairs. It seems to me that perhaps both were a little bit naive dealing with Islam, and then the more that they did, the more sour they became to it. But I have literally never read anything that specifically said from the founders, the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion.
He says the government of the United States of America was not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. And I think what he means there is by we weren't established as, theocracy.
Right. And I mean, that is exactly what that means. But still, to see it in words like that is definitely surprising. Madison,
so on to Jimmy.
The father of the Constitution and key architect of the First Amendment, focused heavily on religious liberty, but left fewer direct mentions of Islam specifically, probably because it kind of interfered. His principles were broad. Religion is a matter of conscience, exempt from civil cognizance, and government should protect all sects equally without establishment. In the Memorial and Remonstrance Against Religious Assessments in 1785, he said, "Who does not see that the same authority which can establish Christianity in exclusion of all other religions may establish with the same ease any particular sect of Christians?" He argued multiplicity of sects, including non-Christian ones, secures liberty, and no single group can dominate. This aligned with Jefferson's Virginia Statute and the founders' inclusion of Muslims in religious freedoms discussions. Madison supported no religious test for office, Article, 6 of the Constitution, and opposed any establishment that could exclude pagan, Mahometan, etc. Benjamin Franklin. Franklin was notably open in his autobiography, describing a non-sectarian preaching hall in Philadelphia. Even if the Mufti of Constantinople, that would be Muslims, were to send missionary to preach Mohammedanism to us, I like calling it Mohammedanism. To preach Mohammedanism to us, he would find a pulpit at his service. Agreed. He quoted positive examples from the life of Muhammad, condemning brutal treatment of captives and praising humane conduct of Muslims by soldiers, in writings criticizing Christian frontiersmen's actions during conflicts with Native Americans. Overall context, the founders operated in an Enlightenment framework influenced by John Locke, who explicitly included Muslims in toleration arguments. They faced Barbary threats, state-sponsored piracy justified religiously, leading to military action under Jefferson, but this did not translate to domestic restrictions on Muslims. The Constitution and early treaties affirmed no religious establishment or enmity toward Islam. No prominent founder advocated for banning or persecuting Muslims. They used Islam as an example of faiths that must be protected to secure liberty for all, including Christians of varying sects, and direct theological praise or criticism was secondary to ensuring civil equality. Primary sources, letters, treaties, and bills confirm this emphasis on pluralism. And so, like I said, I think that letter, those quotes from Adams specifically in his letter to Jefferson after they dealt with the Barbary pirates, shows perhaps a little bit of ignorance in believing Muslims and what they said, and then seeing kind of what it was actually happening in practice. But I've always argued that, we don't need any special laws, we don't need any changes to the Constitution or to the Declaration in order to deal with the Islam problem that we face today. It's already included. We do respect religious liberty here, and that does include Muslims. Full stop. What it doesn't include is if you wish to immigrate to this country from an Islamist country as a Muslim or anybody else. I'm focusing on Muslims, but this applies to anybody. You agree to forego all prior allegiances, and you agree to uphold the supreme law of the land, which is the U.S. Constitution. And so that means if you were to agree to that, move to Texas, for example, and wanted to live in a city among Muslims, and wanted to start an enclave of only Muslims, you can do that. You have the right to freely associate. What you can't do is stop anybody else from freely associating with you, because that would be interfering with another person's rights.
Mm-hmm.
You can move into a neighborhood that is only Muslim, but you can't stop a Jew or a Christian from moving into that neighborhood by any means, whether that's trying to tax them in some certain way, whether that's trying to intimidate them, whatever it is, that would violate your oath to uphold the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, and to forego prior allegiances. The problem, I think, that the problem for Muslims today that wish to live in America is they don't separate government and religion. To them, it's one thing. Here, we separate religion and government. Even those of us that believe this is a Christian nation, I still believe in a separate religion and a separate government, a separate church and a separate government. That doesn't mean you can't pray in government, but it does mean that we don't get to impose Christian values, or not values, Christian tenets on you. We don't get to make you pray and things like that. If you want to live in America as a Muslim, you have to accept that the government cannot be used to impose your religion, period. It's not just your values and principles. It cannot be used to impose your religion. Or you can't live here. Or you are violating your oath to uphold the supreme law of the land and forgo your prior allegiances. Since we already require those things, or we're supposed to, we need to emphasize it a little more, I think. That allows us to deport a lot of people that are causing problems, which is not necessarily a lot of Muslims. It's only, certain extremists that create the issue. And it also allows us to prevent importing Muslims that refuse to live by the same standards the rest of us do. We have a right to uphold our standards. And we don't need to make this into a Christian nation, a Christian government, not a Christian nation, a Christian government, in order to prevent it. We already have the tools available.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you are allowed to practice any religion you want, as long as, your religion doesn't say, I have to live in your house, or you have to pay me money, or you have to sleep with me, or you have to feed me every day. As long as it doesn't interfere with someone else being able to practice their religion, or
what about this? I think this is probably the hardest part to rectify legally. So in these towns in Texas, for example, or in Oklahoma even, where you have Muslims trying to set up Muslim-only towns, one of the things that they'll do is, if somebody moves in or is interested in moving in that is not Muslim, is they'll require I forget what they call it, but a tax that goes directly to the mosque, the local mosque. Now, we can easily say, yeah, you can't do that. You don't get to tax a singular person because they don't subscribe to your religion. But if they were to try and say, if they were instead to tax everybody in the town, because the Muslims aren't going to have a problem giving they already give their money to the mosque. They're not going to have a problem doing it through a tax, right? And that would still de facto prevent most people from moving there, because I don't want to pay for a mosque I have I receive no benefit of. Do you think that that's something that is constitutionally allowed?
I mean, if you say this tax is to support our mosque, a mosque doesn't have authority to tax citizens. So, like, if the mosque is doing it, no, constitutionally, I believe that's literally thievery. But if they set up a government, and through the government they say this tax money only goes to the mosque, and the mosque decides what to do with it, I think that's fine. But constitutionally, because that's like, you know, I don't think it's fine, but I think constitutionally it is. But if the government is instituting a tax on singular persons or households because of any issue, religion or their race or anything, I believe that would be unconstitutional.
Promiscuity. See, and here's the thing, because, like, on one hand, I want to say, no, the Constitution won't allow that, because you can't collect a tax for the church. And you definitely can't collect a tax directly for the church, right? But at the same time, you know, what they'll immediately point to is, while local and state and federal governments even frequently give money to Christian churches for outreach programs and whatever, and that's all we're doing. We're giving the money for outreach programs, you know, to feed the hungry, for example. Whether or not they're actually doing that is a whole nother story. Is that something that, you know, on one hand, I'm fine with it in a Christian church. On the other hand, I'm not when it comes to a mosque, because it is a tenet of the religion to lie, to cheat anybody that is not Muslim. And this is a problem that I think we've also seen with Jewish temples. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. This is one of those things that is frequently discussed in the anti-Zionist world that, as we know, goes way over the top, and frequently you can quickly disprove a lot of the claims that they make. But I also believe it's probably true in certain areas where there is a very strong Jewish community, which is that, you know, money that goes, tax money that goes to these synagogues or feeding the hungry or taking care of homeless or whatever, they choose to only use it for Jewish hungry and Jewish homeless, right? They only use it to better their own community, not anybody. Whereas Christian churches, you know, they don't check what your religion is before they serve you. How do we deal with that? Is it already a violation to give the money to a church, regardless of what type it is, from taxpayers, period? And that just needs to be solely private donation, or? I would say that's one way to fix it. On the other hand, too, I would also say we could just simply make it that, you know, if we're going to give the money to a mosque or to a Jewish, what are they called? I keep forgetting the name. Synagogue, thank you. And find out that they are only using it, you know, that they're checking people's religion at the door, so to speak, then I would say we could probably, you know, that is enough justification to cut off any funds to them in the future. But I don't know. I mean, it gets very sticky in certain situations.
I don't know what to think about it.
The problem fundamentally is not accepting the sinner. It's that you're accepting a sinner that fundamentally believes in deceiving you.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, you know, I feel like unless or until Muslims openly condemn and shun those radical Islamists that believe those particular tenets, then I don't know. I mean, we can't ban them on the basis of religion, but we can ban them on the basis of their practices. And just because those practices come from the religion, it's kind of irrelevant. It's still a practice. And it's a practice that impacts other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like you said earlier, I mean, there's no real reason to make laws regarding like saying like, oh, you cannot practice the Muslim faith in this country. I just think that the faith itself already violates laws. So there's no reason to ban it, because once they violate the law practicing their religion, it's not like you just get to say, oh, he was practicing his religion by running into that school and shooting all those children, so he just gets away free. He gets to go to jail for murder. So
yeah, and that's really, I mean, that's really where our line's always been, because, you know, practicing your religion does exempt you from a lot of things that might otherwise not be accepted, but or a lot of rules, not necessarily laws, but it exempts you from a lot of rules, right? Like sitting down on a plane, right? Generally speaking, you're supposed to only stay seated on the plane unless given permission to get up, but Muslims are allowed to get up and pray, right? It exempts them from that rule because it's a religious practice. That's not the best example, but it's an example. However, it doesn't exempt you from a law that impacts somebody else, be it murder or something less egregious like theft or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, to simplify this a lot more, just stop looking to the government to fix it. We can fix this by not associating with Muslims until they give up these fucking deceitful ways. And any that have, great. I have no problem associating with you. But you have to explicitly do it, because deceit is part of the practice. And so unless you're explicitly denouncing that, I have no reason to trust you, because you're supposed to deceive me. And I think really that's probably where the founders' heads were at more, and that's usually where my head is at too. And sometimes it takes me time to get there, like it did just now. But just stop associating and assimilating with them, and start making it a public shame to practice such things.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, so this is a fairly long section. It's like 4 or 5 pages, maybe 6 or 7. But I didn't have much highlighted after that until page 72. I had the second paragraph highlighted there. But there is a nice picture of Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson writing the Declaration of Independence on page 71.
Yeah, let me pull that up on the screen real quick.
But he's kind of talking about Jefferson after that spurt over the Philadelphia Constitution again. About his wife, Martha, who lost a 1.5-year-old daughter in September.
There's the photo for your viewers.
Oh. There you go, guys. And said soon after his daughter's death, he had to be away for several months on political business. And for some reason, mail was erratic, and so Jefferson hadn't heard much from his wife. And his eldest child, a girl also named Martha, that he became agitated, worried that perhaps tragedy had struck again. The suspense under which I am is too terrible to be endured, Jefferson wrote to his brother-in-law. If anything has happened, for God's sake, let me know. They were fine, but after his return, his wife's health grew more precarious. And he notes that some biographers speculate that there was a miscarriage. And so he spent time at Monticello, stalking deer, drinking good Madeira, and tending to his stables, until March 31st in 1776, Jefferson's mother died. Word of her collapse from a stroke was quickly followed by his own 5-week bout with a headache so severe that he could not travel. And there was serious business that awaited in Philadelphia. However, the issue of independence, what John Adams called not only the greatest question ever considered in America, but perhaps the greatest that would ever be decided among men. In May, Jefferson left Monticello's sorrows and consolations to journey to the Continental Congress, where he arrived. Adams recalled with a reputation for literature, science, and a happy talent of composition. And then that leads us to the picture and why he included that. So he's talking about the Continental Congress, right? The convention.
Yeah. So which page are you at, real quick?
I kind of skimmed through 70 and 71, and I'm moving on to 72.
Okay.
Yeah, Jefferson was on his way to Philadelphia, where a constitutional convention was happening.
There's one quote you gleaned over on 71 that I want to make sure is read.
Okay.
Because I think it also answers a lot of the questions we just asked. He said, "All persons shall have full and free liberty of religious opinion, nor shall any be compelled to frequent or maintain any religious institution."
That's on 72 for me.
You can tax somebody.
Yeah, I hadn't got to that yet, but and so then it moves on to the second paragraph of 72 after that. He would need it on Friday, June 7, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia moved for a declaration of independence. John Adams offered the second. A committee of 5 was appointed to draft a statement on behalf of the Congress. Adams of Massachusetts, Franklin of Pennsylvania, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, Robert Livingston of New York, and of course, Jefferson of Virginia. Jefferson was asked to put pen to paper, and he adjourned to his quarters at 7th and Market for much of the rest of the month. The document, he said, was intended to be an expression of the American mind, and he thought of the writing as an act of synthesis of the sentiments of the day, whether expressed in conversations, in letters, printed essays, or in the elementary books of public right, as Aristotle, Cicero, Locke, Sidney, and C. What is that? The and C thing? What's that mean? Etc. Right?
It just means etc.
Yeah, etc.
It means and anything else, technically.
God was essential in the declaration Jefferson put together in his rented parlor, but the God he wrote of was in no explicit way the God of Abraham, much less God, the Father of the Holy Trinity. So I do think that this paragraph was nice to highlight and read through, because he does mention, it is the part that I got stuck on, the sentiments of the day, whether expressed in conversations, in letters, printed essays, or in the elementary books of public right. This was the thing about what was going on here. I don't know if it was ever expressly like taught to me, in a form that was like, it wasn't just like these people were getting together in these secluded spaces and just making decisions based on what they thought. The American people were at work. They were all involved in this. Everyone was talking about it. And there was some secrecy in it, obviously, because they didn't want the British to hear some of it. But because we later know that our founding fathers were executed and for taking part in the Declaration and stuff. But that was something I thought was important to point out, was just how much of the American people were involved in this creation. It wasn't, obviously we give a bunch of credit to Adams, to Jefferson, Washington, and Franklin for their great works they did in drafting the Declaration of Independence, leading the Revolutionary Army, and just giving us all out wisdom. But the American people took part in this from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's also important to point out in that particular couple sentences you just read, the document, he said, was, quote, intended to be an expression of the American mind, end quote. And he thought of the writing as an active synthesis of the, quote, sentiments of the day, whether expressed in conversation, in letters, printed essays, or in the elementary books of the public right, as Aristotle, Cicero, Locke, Sidney, and everyone else, end quote. And then Meacham says, God was essential in the Declaration Jefferson put together in his rented parlor. But the God he wrote of was in no explicit way the God of Abraham, much less God the Father of the Holy Trinity. What he's saying is the God that he wrote of was not the Christian God. I don't think that's true. I don't think that. I do think that he intended for it to be interpreted by the reader in the sense that God was God, but I do believe he believed in one God. When he said it wasn't the Father of the Holy Trinity, he's kind of playing with words there, because Jefferson didn't believe in the Trinity. He felt that the Holy Trinity being 3 in 1 and 1 in 3 was wrong, basically. He believed that was added to the Bible and kind of unnecessary scripture, more or less. But that didn't mean he didn't believe in God of Abraham. That didn't mean he didn't believe in the Christian God. He just didn't believe in the Trinity itself. Specifically, he didn't believe in the Holy Spirit, and he didn't believe that Jesus was God's son and or God himself. He just believed he was a prophet. But he was still the same God. In the end, does that matter? I don't know. When Muslims say God versus when I say God, is that a different person? I mean, we would argue that it is. Me and a Muslim might argue that it is. But in the end, does it matter? I mean, we both believe in one created.
I believe Muslims pray to basically Satan or Baal.
Interesting.
Not that they're praying to our God.
I believe that the tenets that they practice are incorrect. But I believe that they believe they are praying to the God.
They might believe that they're praying to our
I don't
God,
believe that they're
but
doing it.
I don't believe that they are.
I don't believe that they're doing it correctly, so to speak. But I do believe that they believe the same thing that I do, that it is the single God, the creator of the universe. And so does it matter that, when they read it versus when I read it, the interpretation's the same, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew you'd have a lot to say about that end part.
I
think it's worth. I agree with you. So
I think it's worth noting. Like, I find the arguments between Christians and Muslims, Christians and Jews, and especially between different Christian sects, mostly useless. None of us know exactly what is correct 2,000 years later. None of us know exactly. But I do think we all inherently know the difference between right and wrong. And I do think we all inherently recognize that there is, while, Muslims would say their book, I mean, they don't even believe their book is the word of God. They believe it's the word of Muhammad. Why wouldn't you go to the one that we all recognize as the word of God? I don't know. Now, Jews might argue that they have the real word of God versus Christians, but at the end of the day, the tenets of either religion is roughly the same. There are some notable differences, but generally speaking, like I said, all humans recognize what is right and what is wrong. Is that because of what we were brought up in versus some sort of inherent thing? I don't know, but I just don't find the particular beefs that some people come up with to be of great use, honestly.
Yeah, he then, continues to talk about the Declaration of Independence. I don't know if you want to read it. You can if you want, but
I mean, I think it's always worth reading when it comes up, so I'll read it real quick.
All right.
When in the course, it's only the first paragraph. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impelled them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or property, depending on which version we're looking at. The pursuit of happiness thing, I get why we did it, but I think it was a mistake. It originally said life, liberty, and property. Anyway.
I like to pursue happiness.
It's just such a
yeah, I
easy,
know.
Easy to manipulate word,
Yeah, he starts talking about,
porking another man.
I got a comment from Matthew Powell. Hello, Matthew Powell. Sorry I didn't catch you. I don't know how long ago you commented, but he says, not all we know and we capitalize. Who wrote that? A human? Who wrote what? I mean, this book was written by a human, yes.
What does the whole quote say?
Oh, he said he just got here. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Matthew Piao, because I was not paying attention to my chat. So if you could repeat again specifically what you're having a problem with, I would be likely to address that. But Meacham pretty much continues to talk about, if you just got here, we're reviewing American Gospel by Jon Meacham.
Sort of. We're also just arguing about religion in general.
Yeah. He said who wrote that. Jon Meacham, American Gospel. We're in chapter 2, page 73, in case you happen to have the book.
I'll put it up on
he
the screen.
says, I'm an atheist and hate politics. All right, buddy. This will be a trip for you. You should tune in.
This may not be the right episode.
Yeah, here's a better picture. Thanks, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
But he's continuing to talk about how Jefferson only mentions nature's God and creator and not specifically like Jesus. Which, yes, you're right, but obviously you just covered that is not a real point.
Say what now?
Jon Meacham basically says that Jefferson only mentioned God as nature's God and creator in the Declaration of Independence. But then you had already said your piece on that.
Yeah.
So next thing I have highlighted is on 74. So
he goes on to mention that they added two allusions to God: firm reliance on the protection of the divine providence, as they pledged their lives, fortunes, sacred honor, and then they also appealed to the supreme judge of the world. And he claims the divine providence and supreme judge of the world were no more specific to the God of the Bible than creator and nature's God, which is true. And I think they obviously went with the neutral language for a reason, but they also knew, they all knew and agreed what they were talking about too. And I think it's very similar to the point that I'm making, which is they're referring to the Christian God. They're not referring to any specific variation of that. And so while they are talking about a neutral God, they are still talking about a single creator of the universe, not Roman gods of lightning and fucking thunder and whatever else, or anything else. I mean, when it comes down to it, Christians, Jews, and Muslims, we all technically pray to the same God. Now, again, we can argue about whether the tenets that are practiced actually achieve that or not, but we all believe, basically speaking, or technically speaking, in the same God, the same single sole creator of the universe. I think you're right. I think he's trying to distance the specificity in an unnecessary and an unrealistic way. He's trying to separate the allusions to God from God himself, and there's no reason to believe that's what they were trying to do.
Yep. Meacham mentions after that Jefferson began to believe that his document was sacred scripture and that his writing desk was a holy object. And he said, Jefferson says, politics as well as religion has its superstitions. These gaining strength with time may one day give imagery value to this relic for its associations with the birth of the great charter of our independence.
Fascinating.
A little full of himself, huh?
A little bit.
My desk here is holy. Because I wrote a document on it. It was a good one. It was a pretty good document, so.
I want to read this section here real quick.
All right.
The God of the Declaration is a divine force that created the universe, endows all men with human rights, and is an actor in the drama of the world he made. Jefferson's God may not favor one nation over another, but his God, Jefferson said, quote, watches over our country's freedom and welfare. It was this God who became a God of America's public religion. Quote, we are not a world ungoverned by the laws and the power of a superior agent, Jefferson said. Quote, our efforts are in his hands and directed by it, and he will give them their direct effect in his own time. His God mentioned attention and prayer for mysteriously, by grace, God could, Jefferson said, enlighten the minds of people and guide the nation's leaders. As far as possible, religious debate belonged outside of politics. Jefferson, for one, relished theology, but saw such arguments as private intellectual affairs, not fit subjects for government. I write with freedom, he said to one correspondent, because while I claim a right to believe in one God, I yield as freely to others that of believing in three. I yield as freely to others of believing in three. Both religions, I find, make honest men, and that is the only point society has any right to look to. I think that's pretty well said.
Yeah.
And I think that's worthy of note that yeah, I mean that's the only concern of government and of society as a whole. And that's why it comes back to when we go back to the Muslim thing, for example, that's why it's not relevant what the religion tells them or teaches them. It's relevant what they practice and what they do. And if they violate the law or the Constitution and what they practice and what they do, then that's all that matters. It doesn't matter that it was a religious tenet that told them to do that. Well, should we wrap up this section of the book?
This section? Oh, yeah. There's a couple of things. I highlighted this part on page 76. The flies were the least of the Americans' worries. All summer, the delegates worked with the sure and certain knowledge that if they lost the war to George III, they would face capital punishment. There was nervous joking about the risk they were taking. For the rest of his life, Jefferson loved the story of how Benjamin Harrison, an enormously fat Virginian, once told the wispy Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts, "Jerry, when the hanging comes, I shall have the advantage. You'll kick in the air half an hour after it is all over with me." Gallows humor.
I just read that quote somewhere yesterday, and I wish I could remember where it was now, but I read it on air, I think, too. That's funny.
And then in the final paragraph, in New York, some soldiers of the Continental Army took part in a kind of riot of ecstatic colonists, tore down a statue of King George III. General Washington was not amused. "The general hopes and trusts," Washington told his troops, "that every officer and man will endeavor so to live and act as becomes a Christian soldier, defending the dearest rights and liberties of his country." That was in a... What?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
That was in a thing. What was it? Like a speech that he was giving.
Yeah.
Did it say
you want to know the
when?
best part about that story?
What?
That statue that they tore down?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't just tear it down for no reason. It was made of lead. They tore it down, melted it down, and made shot to shoot the fucking British with. Because we were drastically short on ammunition and gunpowder. And so they tore down the statue of the king and melted it down and made bullets out of it.
Heck yeah. So you remember how I told you I wanted to do another thing like we did for Jefferson? This was the part that I wanted to do this with. I wanted to do a kind of reenactment of this speech, but I can't remember what the speech was, and I forgot to write it up and get us ready to...
I'll figure out the speech real quick. What was the quote?
"That every officer and man will endeavor so to live and act as becomes a Christian soldier, defending the dearest rights of liberties of his country."
Okay, slow down. "That every officer and man will endeavor
so to live and act as becomes a Christian soldier, defending the dearest rights and liberties of his country."
Hold on. "So to live and act..." What? Sorry, it's worded
as
funny.
Becomes a Christian soldier.
Christian soldier. Okay, now the rest.
Defending the dearest rights and liberties of his country.
All right. It is... This quote comes from George Washington's General Orders to the Continental Army, issued July 9th, 1776, at headquarters in New York. Not a formal speech, but a military general order, a written directive read to the troops. This order came shortly after the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, and it read, and it was read to the army. The specific section addresses the appointment of chaplains and calls for moral and religious conduct among the soldiers. It's not very long. Do you want to read it?
Yeah, I was gonna read, I think, the whole thing, because I think the whole context is good. So if you want to read it, that's fine.
Sure. It's literally just 2 short paragraphs. The Honorable Continental Congress, having been pleased to allow a chaplain to each regiment with the pay of $33 1/3 per month, the colonels of commanding officers of each regiment are directed to procure chaplains accordingly. Persons of good characters and exemplary lives, to see that all inferior officers and soldiers pay them suitable respect and attend carefully upon religious exercise. The blessing and protection of heaven are at all times necessary, but especially so in times of public distress and danger. The general hopes and trusts that every officer and man will endeavor so to live and act as becomes a Christian soldier defending the dearest rights and liberties of his country. It's important to note that while founders like Jefferson and Adams recognized the incredible importance in a neutral government towards religion, they also firmly believed in Christianity. They also firmly believed that Americans should be Christians, not enforcing it, but that it was the best way to live, and that it was the best hope for a successful republic. Which brings us to Franklin's quote, "A republic if you can keep it." And God, I always forget who said it. I think it was Adams. This Constitution is for a moral and religious people and is wholly inadequate to the government of any other.
Mm-hmm. Pretty sure that's Adams.
I think so.
Yeah, I wanted to give a tone for that and then read off the whole thing, kind of like we did with Jefferson's thing, with Jefferson's death. But I forgot to write up a little thing to give you the tone of what was going on. This is after the Declaration of Independence is drafted and sent, I'm pretty sure.
Well, and there's a really
church bells are ringing throughout towns. People are praying and taking reverence in God. They go and tear down a statue of King George III, and George Washington decides to give this statement.
And there's a really good story that goes in connection with this too, and that I think is just one of the many, many stories that illustrates the divine providence of this nation, which is that one of the chaplains listening to that speech, and that was hired because of that proclamation, I forget his name. It was one of our founders, and I can't remember his name exactly, but he was a doctor, a surgeon or something from New York, I want to say. And in the first battle with the British, where we got our asses kicked when they landed on Manhattan, and we had to flee across the Delaware in the middle of the night under the cover of darkness, and we would have been slaughtered, or at least a few thousand of our troops would have been slaughtered. The revolution would have been ended right there, except as the sun was coming up, because there were still a few thousand troops left on the shores, as the sun was coming up, but the British would have seen that we were retreating, a massive fog set in and protected the last troops as they made it across the Delaware. But the interesting part is one of the founder, it was the chaplain that listened to that speech from George Washington, ended up saving the lives of a young boy in that battle. And that ended up being John Adams, 5th President of the United States. There's a little more coincidence there that I'm not remembering offhand, but it's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
It's just one of the many ways where, like, these impossible coincidences continue to happen so that the nation can continue. It's impossible to learn history, the full and true history of the United States, and not believe in that there is some sort of divine providence there.
Mm-hmm.
Call it whatever you want, but it's a hell of a lot of coincidences that just don't exist in normal life.
And that ends off the section Diabolical Persecution. Brings us to Protecting Church from State, which opens up with a very long paragraph that's basically a whole page long. When I read this part, I didn't have my pen. So I didn't make any highlights through this section. But I'm sure there's things I wanted to talk about, but I don't want to read the whole paragraph here.
I'm not sure where you're at this point. Oh, okay. Never mind.
Page 77 is where it starts for me. And this is it's basically like 3 long paragraphs of this section. Only about 2 pages long, really. I don't know, I guess I could just start reading a little bit of this. Washington's use of phrases like Christian soldier have long fed a sense that the nation was much more explicitly sectarian in its early years. What does he mean by that? Washington's use of phrases like Christian soldier have long fed a sense that the nation was much more explicitly sectarian in its early years. Is that not like contradictory? Or am I sectarian a word that I'm getting confused with a different word?
I don't know. Let me double check. Sectarianism of relating to or characteristic of sect, adhering or confined to the dogmatic limits of a sect or denomination.
Okay, never mind. I thought sectarian meant something else. By most measures, it is true that the colonies were full of religious people, and most of these were Christian. Washington laced his military orders with references to the Almighty, but usually in the same vein as Jefferson's God in the Declaration of Independence. And he quotes from Washington, "Let every face brighten and every heart expand with grateful joy and praise to the supreme disposer of all events who are granted us this signal success," which was Washington had wrote after American victory in Saratoga. And he continues, "The chaplains of the army are to prepare short discourses suited to the joyful occasion to deliver to their several corps." This thing, we're continuing on, still talking about how they're basically, he's pointing out that they're not specifically saying like Jesus or I'm praying to the Abrahamic God. They're not professing it. But if you're a Christian and you've been to church maybe at some point in your life and you've listened to a sermon, or you've listened to the preacher pray or someone get up in front of the congregation and pray, not all that we say Almighty God, we say things like that, what he said, the supreme disposer of all events. Like, it's still the same God, just because he's not specifically saying the Christian God is.
He's trying to find every example where they don't specifically say God, and trying to extrapolate that to mean that they were being neutral in it. Like, first of all, people just generally don't do that. Yes, Jefferson did that, not necessarily in his own mind, but in the sense that he didn't want the government being directly tied to one religion or another, one sect or another. Not necessarily one religion or another, but one sect or another. He wanted it to apply to all peoples. The way in which, and the difference with George Washington, and the way in which, you know, he practiced his faith and his life was directly and clearly to the Christian God. He made no, oh, the word escapes my head, but whatever. He didn't hide the fact that he believed that all good men were Christian, essentially, and for lack of a better way to put it, and then also that Freemasons made better, made even more trustworthy men, basically, which some would argue that Freemasons are satanic. I don't know. I tend, you know, I've also heard argument that that it's just a Christian brotherhood, so to speak, that is much more benign, and it's just the mysteriousness that allows people's minds to run wild. But they're actually, dude, I legitimately the other day, I thought it was like the funniest thing ever. They're recruiting Freemasons in Washington because there's so few people signing up for, you know, for these clubs and stuff. And so I saw a commercial recruiting people to be Freemasons. I thought about it for a minute. I mean, Washington found it important.
Yeah, and what was I gonna say?
Have you heard the story of the native chief that fought Washington?
I don't think so.
It's a fascinating story, and I'll tell it real quick, and then I got to get going.
Okay.
Sorry to be short, but so God, I wish I could remember which battle it was. I'll tell the full story next time, but I'll give you the quick overview. In a battle between the colonists and Native Americans, and I feel like the British too. I feel like it was a three-way battle, or maybe the natives were fighting with the British for whatever reason in this particular case. And this chief had they saw Washington riding on the horse, and he had all his men fire at him. Well, at the end of that battle, Washington had many holes in his coat. He had been shot many times, not actually hit. Well, anyway, later on, many years down the road, the chief is going to die, and before he died, he ordered his men to take him to see who he called the man of God, or the I forget the exact words. Like I said, I'll tell the full story because it's much more interesting if I can tell you the full story next time, because the amount of coincidence is impossible otherwise. But he has his men take him to Washington, and he tells him about that day, and he tells him that when the chief saw him on the battlefield, he realized immediately, because George Washington was a man of very prominent stature, and it was very clear that he was the one that was leading the army. And Washington was riding back and forth along the line of colonists to keep up morale and to give orders and such. And the chief recognized, you know, if they could take him out, that they would essentially win the battle. And so he ordered his men, who he described as never missing, to fire on him, all of them, to fire on the man on the horse. And every single one of them missed every single shot. And he realized in that moment that Washington was protected by God and that there was nothing that they could do. And so they retreated and went home. And there's some other coincidence there too that I can't remember offhand. I'll tell you the full story next time, but it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, I know that story. I just didn't know it mentioned that way. Yeah, I love that story.
I'll share it with the viewers then. Anyway, so next Sunday we'll pick up where we left off.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe get a little farther.
Yeah, I mean, we almost made it to where we wanted to be.
Yeah, what are we on, page 80?
Mm-hmm. We're supposed to be on page 86. We were supposed to get to page 86 today, so we're only 6 pages off, which isn't too bad.
A little extended. All right.
MillerTalk.substack.com. On X, MillerTalk_pod. And I stream to Rumble, Twitch, YouTube, X. A little irregularly, but it happens, so.
And for right now, theoretically, every Sunday.
Theoretically.
At least. You can find this show, x.com/JBU_show, rumble.com/user/justbetweenus. And I am also, typically the show is Wednesday through Sunday, but I am also on a kind of hiatus at the moment. And so my shows are, I have been irregularly putting some out just as there's things worth talking
live
about.
Last night.
Yep. Yeah. I was live last night and then I do this show with you on Sunday. But yeah, I'll be back to it soon as well. There's just kind of some things in limbo in my life right now, so I needed to take a little time off from having to focus on it so much. But we'll be back to it here soon. Nonetheless, there's a full history of shows you can go and watch if you like the show, and if not, there'll be plenty more coming. All right. Anything else before we go?
Stay strapped or get clapped.
All right. Well, with that, my name is Chris.
I'm Austin.
What the hell happened to the music? There it is.
Oh.
And this has been the JBU Miller Talk Jon Meacham podcast.
Bye, 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 bye.